Okay, let's talk about Kubernetes. For years, it's been the undisputed king of container orchestration. I mean, it's pretty much the default choice for any modern infrastructure. But lately, something's been brewing. A kind of quiet rebellion, you could say, as developers and companies are starting to ask a really important question. Is all this hype really worth the headache?
And this quote just nails it. It perfectly captures that growing frustration. You see this huge gap opening up between spending all your time building incredibly complex infrastructure and actually shipping a product that people can use. The message is loud and clear. Simplicity and speed, they're making a major comeback.
But what about the money? This is where it gets really wild. Industry reports show that the average Kubernetes cluster wastes up to 70% of its budget. Think about that. If that's not a small leak, that's a flood of money just going down the drain on resources that are over-provisioned and just sitting there not being used.
And it's not just about the money, right? The human cost is just as high. A staggering 68% of companies say they struggle with just how complex Kubernetes is to implement. We're talking about a massive tax on your operations that slows everything down and just burns out your best engineers.
And look, this isn't just some vague feeling people have. The numbers are actually backing this up. A recent survey from the CNCF found that 42% of organizations are actually going in reverse. They're taking their super complex microservices and consolidating them back into simpler monoliths. The pendulum is definitely swinging back.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at this Kubernetes paradox. Then we'll dive into this weird thing called resume-driven development. We'll get really clear on when Kubernetes actually makes sense, and then look at the simpler alternatives. After that, we'll talk about how to tame your costs if you're already using it, and we'll wrap it all up with something called the Boring Tech Manifesto.
All right, so let's get into one of the biggest reasons this is all happening. And what's fascinating is that it's not really a technical reason, it's a social one. It's this idea of resume-driven development, where the tech choices we make have more to do with our careers than with what the business actually needs.
Yeah, it has a name, resume-driven development, or RDD for short. It's basically when you pick a technology, like Kubernetes, not because it's the best tool for the job, but because it's a hot buzzword. It looks great on a CV, it helps you get that next job, and it can land you a higher salary.
And this slide, man, it just lays the disconnect bare. On one side, you have hiring managers who actually value experience with established, proven tech. But on the other, you have a whopping 82% of developers who think they need to chase the latest, trendiest thing to be attractive as a candidate. It's a total mismatch. Okay, but let's pump the brakes for a second. We're not here to just bash Kubernetes. It's an incredibly powerful tool for a very, very specific set of problems. The whole key is being brutally honest with yourself about whether you actually have those problems.
So how do you know if you're in that camp? Well, the key thing here is scale. We're talking massive scale. You might need Kubernetes if you're juggling like 50 or more microservices, or if you're dealing with huge, unpredictable traffic spikes, think 10 million plus requests a day. Maybe you need true high availability across different cloud providers. The point is, if you don't have a whole dedicated platform team just to manage this beast, you're probably not at the scale where the benefits even begin to outweigh the costs.
I love this metaphor because it's just perfect. Kubernetes is a battleship. It is incredibly capable, powerful, and ready for war. But you would never use a battleship for a fishing trip. For most projects, it's just way too much firepower, way too much complexity, and way too much cost.
So, if you're not steering a battleship, what should you be using? Well, luckily there is a whole world of simpler, faster, and way more cost-effective solutions out there that get the job done for most of us. This is what we call the pragmatic path. And this table breaks it down really nicely. You've got a few main paths. For startups or new projects, these platform-as-a-service options like Render or Fly.io are amazing. They just handle all the infrastructure for you. For serverless stuff, managed services like AWS Fargate are perfect. You literally only pay for what you use. And honestly, for a whole lot of smaller projects, good old Docker Compose is all you'll ever need.
But okay, let's be real. Sometimes you do need that battleship. Maybe you went through the checklist and yep, you're one of the folks who genuinely needs Kubernetes. Well, don't worry, you're not doomed to waste 70% of your money. There are absolutely concrete things you can do to get those costs under control.
It really comes down to these three main things you need to nail. First, right-sizing your resources so they actually match what your apps need. Second, getting really smart about auto-scaling. And third, making savvy purchasing decisions with your cloud provider.
So let's talk autoscaling. First up is the horizontal pod autoscaler, or HPA. The best way to think about this is like adding more lanes to a highway during rush hour. It scales out. It just creates more copies of your application when traffic goes crazy, and then it gets rid of them when things calm down. Simple as that.
Then you've got the vertical pod autoscaler, or VPA. Now, if HPA is about adding more cars to the road, VPA is like giving each car a bigger, more powerful engine. It scales up by giving your existing apps more CPU and memory when they need it. This is absolutely crucial for efficiency and for stopping that resource waste.
And finally, tying it all together is the cluster autoscaler. This one works at an even higher level. Think of it like opening or closing entire sections of a giant parking lot. It adds or removes the actual virtual machines that everything runs on, making sure you are only paying for the exact amount of raw infrastructure you need at any given moment.
Okay, and now for that third pillar, smart purchasing. I mean, just look at this chart. The difference is night and day. On-demand pricing is flexible, sure, but it's the most expensive. Reserved instances can save you a ton if your workload is predictable. But the real game changer is spot instances. For any work that can handle being interrupted, you can slash your compute costs by up to a mind-blowing 90%.
All right, let's zoom out for a second and bring this all home. What we're seeing in the industry is this big shift, this kind of correction. It's a move away from complexity just for the sake of it and towards a new philosophy that some are calling the boring tech manifesto.
And this right here really sums up the whole change in thinking. The old way was to start with the cool tool, right? How do we make our project work with Kubernetes? The new, pragmatic way of thinking flips that completely. You start with the problem and ask a much better question. What is the absolute simplest thing that could possibly work for our users?
So that's the question we want to leave you with. It's the one that every single developer, every team lead, every CTO should be asking themselves. Is your tech stack actually serving your users, or is it just serving your resume? Because at the end of the day, shipping value to real people is the only thing that truly matters, not the buzzwords you use to get there.